Have you started doing your podcast yet?
No, I have to I'm developing my online course that will launch in September. And so once I'm done with the course, then the podcast will launch this summer.
Okay. What's the course going to be?
The course is all about my career coaching. That's really,
Okay.
where I'm moving. So I
All right.
created a new brand after 22 years in my other brand, Leap. I created a secondary brand, Flourish Coaching Company, and it's all around career coaching, career clarity for teens and young adults. So in that space of like 16 to 24-year-olds who are just trying to figure out what's that next move after high school career-wise. And so the course is a 5-pillar, 5-module framework around working them through how to get there.
Hello, I'm Shane Bybee, and for 30 years I've been helping students achieve their college dreams. In that time, I've discovered that success looks different for every student. That's what this podcast is about. What do families need to know to be successful in the college admissions process? Today I'm visiting with Lisa Marker Robbins, did you say a Jane of all trades? What's the politically correct way to do it
There you go. I know.
nowadays?
Who knows, right?
In the test prep and career prep industry. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are?
Sure. So in college, I was very conflicted. I was an education major one semester, a business major the next. Couldn't figure it out. So I was very confused back then. And finally realized, gosh, I got to stick with one of these so that I can get out of college in 4 years. And so at that point, I selected education as my major for a number of reasons that we don't even have to explore and get into right now, but that seemed like the next best step after college. So I got out of college, started teaching at the high school level, 7th through 12th grade certified teacher, and started teaching and spent 8 years in that space teaching kids, and actually thought I would be in public education forever, to the point where I earned my master's degree in educational administration, principal's license, thought that was where I was headed. And at a juncture in 1998-99, after I had just become a mom and things with work, I shifted. And I always say I took a year off and thought I was going back to the classroom, and accidentally started my company in 1999. So, and then ended up ending my teaching career. I'm still a teacher. I always call myself a teacher. So if you want to go with that Jane or Jack of all trades, I think at the heart of it all, I'm a teacher. But I started a business. So eventually I worked out that whole conflicted education versus business, because I'm in the business of education now. And I've been there for 22 years, started out as a test prep and tutoring company. And that's how I got my start.
And so the test prep and tutoring company is called Leap?
It's Leap, and we were only in Cincinnati until COVID hit. And now we're in thank you, COVID, right? And there are good parts and bad parts to COVID. So, so we're headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I am from. This is where I grew up. I always joke that I've lived my life in a 10-mile radius, which is sadly about the truth. And but I like it here. And so we started out test prep and tutoring, and we still do that. We've been doing that for all 22 years. But my role has developed over the years. I then, about 5 years in or so, put on the hat of independent educational consultant, helping families work out that college piece. And then about 10 years ago, I did more of a change and added career coaching in the space, working with 16 to 24-year-olds. Huge need for that, and that's probably my greatest passion at this point. If I could do anything, one thing all day long, every day, that's what it would be. And
that's the reason that we're doing this particular episode was actually a parent request. One of our listeners said, "Hey, the thing she realized, like they were mapping out 8th grade
she had, I think, a rising 8th grader who was getting ready to map out her high school plan.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, my 8th grader knows what my husband and I do for a living and what they see on TV. And if it's not, doctor, lawyer, cop,
Right.
then they don't know it's a career. And that's when I reached out to you. I was like, hey, can you talk about that? So the career counseling part of it, what does that look like? What's your new company going to be called?
So the new company is Flourish Coaching Company. And I say it's our sister brand, but it'll be a standalone sister brand to Leap. And I'm getting excited. Probably by the time that you publish this, our website will be up and running at flourishcoachingco.com. And our primary objective is, parents are getting ready to spend 6 figures on college. And you're in this space with me, Shane. And so, and I'm a mom too. I've got 3 high school graduates at this point. And so it's expensive. And so we're not just going in there to experiment. I mean, I look back and I go, if a student did what I did in college, they would not now be out in 4 years. That back and forth. And I was super conflicted on what I was wired for. Ultimately, it was business more so in the terms of like a coach and a business owner. And so I want to help kids figure that out. And I want to help parents know that their kids have it figured out before they spend over $100,000 on college. And so that's really why we're in that space. It was like so many times kids, are told, oh, you're good at math, you should be an engineer. And being good at math and loving math does not a happy engineer make. I mean, there's plenty of people that you and I know as peers of ours, adults, who are like, man, I hate my job. And I don't want anybody to ever say that again. That's my utopian world that I live in.
Yeah. That's what do you want to do? When you do that consultation, and it's, so what do you think you want to major in? I'm thinking business or engineering. Okay, why? Well, I'm good at math.
Right.
Okay. There's so many nuances to it beyond that. What's the ideal time for you to start working with a student?
Yeah, I always say it can be too early, actually, which sounds, as a business owner, sounds ridiculous because I'm sometimes turning business away. But at the heart of it, like, I'm really there to serve kids and their families. And if the time's not yet right, I would rather risk losing that client than not serve them well. And so it can be too early. It's never too late. I mean, I'm working with people our age that, are like, hey, I'm going to do another chapter of work, and I didn't like the first one, so I want to know what that looks like. Like, what is that? So, but I mostly stick to the 16 to 24-year-olds. So I feel like my sweet spot, going back to my utopian society that I want to have, if I had my way, we would grab students midpoint through the sophomore year of high school, maybe like through that summer. The reality is I actually serve more students who are beyond that point, because they start to get knee deep into the college selection and application piece. We're recording this at the end of April. I had 2 seniors who actually talked to me a number of years ago about maybe they would do career coaching, and they did all the other stuff with us, and then they panicked right before college deposit. Like, oh, holy cow, I should have done this. I got to find a way to work it in now. Can you get us in stat? And we did, and we got it worked out, and that helped them make informed decisions. But the reason I like that juncture of like the midpoint in sophomore year is when students are applying to college, they're applying with 6 semesters worth of grades, right? So we are at the midpoint, halfway through sophomore year, of those 6 semesters. So high school's 8 semesters. We apply to college with a GPA that is 6 semesters in. So that allows us to see what students how they're performing academically, which comes into play in some of these careers, right? You can be wired to enjoy the work of a NASA rocket scientist, which I did an interview on just a few weeks ago. It was a great interview. I learned so much. I always learn so much from talking to people in their careers. But you may not have the aptitude or the smarts to be the NASA rocket scientist. we need to know how you're performing in school. Can you get into the programs that are required to credential you to do those jobs? And are you going to be able to complete them and do well in those? So that's part of why I like that juncture. Also, as you know, in the test prep world, we at that point, kids have taken maybe a pre-ACT or a PSAT. The reality is that it's so funny, even in this test optional world that we're kind of in right now, LSAT's not going away for law school entrance. You know, MCAT's not going away for medical school entrance. PCAT pharmacy. Like, I need to see what kind of a test taker you are. You may have to actually sit for some entrance exams to graduate school if you're in a field that's going to require graduate work. So I like having some test scores, and I like the kids just maturing. I mean, what freshman wants to talk about college and career when they don't even have their feet planted in high school yet? So let's not do that to our kiddos. So I will all day long risk losing a client to do it at the right time.
It's got to be real to the student, right? It's 14. That just doesn't seem real to them. It's funny how that works sometimes, that when suddenly it's not real till it's real.
Exactly.
You made an interesting comment about the test going away. I think it's interesting to point out, like, not only will they probably have an MCAT or a GRE or GMAT, something down the road, or possibly have it down the road. If you want to be a teacher, there's a certification test you have to pass. If you want to be a nurse, there's licensing tests you have to pass. So this idea of, I'll just apply test optional and get into a program, well, that's great, but there's a lot of programs that are still going to require, even nursing, though you can get into a school, you can't get into many nursing programs unless you have a minimum SAT. The threshold's relatively low.
Yeah.
What's up?
Well, we've encountered it twice now during this test optional time period. And it's actually terrifying to me, because I'm like, oh my gosh, where else is this happening? And families don't know. So 2 colleges who will let them remain nameless today, which is tough for me to do, but 2 schools that are test optional. They were test optional for the class of 21. They're both test optional for the class of 22. And kids, we've met 2 clients of ours in the test prep realm who applied to the university test optional, admitted to the university. Now that they're into the program, they have found out that to continue in the education major, so there's a new major for you, and I totally agree with you about nursing and whatnot. They're now, both of these schools, 2 totally different schools. One's public, one's private. One's small, one's a large state university. We've had 2 students now come and say, oh my gosh, I have to take the ACT now. I'm already admitted to college. I've already deposited. And if I don't take it and get these minimum scores, I cannot continue in my education major. I would have to switch my major to something I don't want to do.
Or the other one, and I've had this happen at 2 universities, if, oh my gosh, I have to take an SAT or ACT or an AccuPlacer. There's a couple other tests, but it's still a test you have to take. Or I'm going to have to take 3 remedial classes that get no credit and cost about $4,000 just off of the class fee.
Yeah.
If you take the average per hour cost, it's going to be $4,000, not including the extra 2/3 of a semester that adds.
Exactly.
Or, 3/5 of a semester that adds, not including that to your schedule. So there's been some, I wouldn't say shenanigans, because I don't think it's been intentional. I do think the colleges, when they made these decisions, but there's been some things that have happened now that are definitely they're unintended consequences. And, the cynical people will tell you, well, it's part of their business model, getting students to do remedial classes. But it's definitely something parents aren't expecting. And you've seen the data we've been tracking. Anywhere, I'm trying to word this carefully. I don't want to say you're more likely to get in with a test score, but we know that students who submit with a test score are admitted anywhere from 20% to 120% more frequently than students who don't submit test scores. So if you submit a test score, you're much more likely to get in. May not be the right way to characterize the data, but
I know the wording of
get in
it.
more
I
frequently.
struggle with it as well. But you and I, I know we have that same shared set of data, and we're even, you and I are talking about schools who released the data that we were able to make those.
Yes.
But on that list, remember, we have schools that they didn't release their data.
Telling.
They won't tell, but yet then there were some other ones that came out that said we strongly still believe in scores. We strongly still, want scores. Ohio State University, the Ohio State University.
Is that the Ohio State? I just checking.
Let's not forget the. They clearly stay on their website, while we're test optional for the class of 22, we are not permanently test optional, and we see that test scores are a strong predictor of who will be successful here. Read between the lines, send scores.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So these scores and things really matter with this career coaching, right? I mean, if tests completely went away for our high school kiddos, and then all of a sudden they're faced with these, to your point, in graduate school, like, I need to know as a career coach, how a student's testing. I also, and I want freshmen to get in there and just like figure out high school and have some fun and get involved in their extracurriculars. That's a huge part of figuring out who do I want to be when I grow up. So yeah, that's my, going all the way back, like that's my ideal time. If I could grab every high school sophomore, that'd be my dream.
If a parent, one of the controversial things about what you and I do, right, is people are like, well, I don't want to give away that secret, and I don't want to give away your secrets necessarily. You and I look at test prep or college prep as kind of like the personal trainer. You're an academic personal trainer. I could go to the gym and I can work out and I'll get stronger. But if I hire a personal trainer, I'll get stronger than I would have otherwise, and I'll do it faster. So I'll be able to make those gains more quickly, and that's really what we're catalysts in that process.
Yep.
If a parent is doing this on their own or is trying to figure some things out, what are some resources parents have that you would recommend that they could look at? But on their way to obviously going to the website flourishcoachingco.com, as a part of getting to that part of their journey, what are some resources they can turn to?
So let me give you our framework first. So the pillars are to know yourself. I think you have to start with knowing yourself well. So it's know yourself, know careers, and then know your path. Okay? So we start with know yourself, which we do use a personality assessment, the Berkman method, that I'm master certified in, and I've done well over 3,000 clients, like probably about 3,500 clients with the Berkman assessment. So lots of experience there. You're not going to be able to do that part on your own. But the second part B of the know yourself is, how do I show up in the world? So let's start conversations with our kiddos. I love that when I say starting this with sophomores, and you can even start these conversations with your freshmen. How much time do we have in the car? I think back to all those hours in the car with my kiddos when I was running them everywhere before they were driving and had a vehicle, right? Those are precious hours, and they tend to really open up during that time. So the know yourself, having conversations around not what do you want to do when you grow up, but what do you want to be? Who do you want to be? That's more about like character and impact and things like that. Curating really great conversations with our kids. Knowing yourself is, what hobbies do I love, and why do I love those hobbies and gravitate to them? I often say, think back to when our kids were 9 years old, and what would we look out into the family room or into the yard and we would see them doing? Have conversations around, remember when you used to, like, why do you think you love that so much? Like, talking to our kids about how they're showing up in the world. So one of the things that we do is we create a lens by which, after we know ourselves well, that we can then evaluate career fit as we collect information on the careers. So through those conversations, like if you're a mom or a dad and you're having those really great conversations, even if your student's not going to journal about them, that's a hard sell, I understand. A parent could start creating like a reflection journal, or just do a Google Doc where you're dropping in like nuggets of truth about your child from these conversations. you're being super purposeful in those conversations, but it'll feel to your child while you're running to whatever practice that they're organic. So that's not even like a resource to go out and get or grab or use, but it's certainly something that they can completely do on their own, for sure.
So
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, you mentioned the Berkman assessment. Is that what you called it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The Berkman tool. What exactly? What's that? What is that? What's that process?
So the Berkman assessment's been around since the 1950s, crazy enough. Dr. Roger Berkman created that when he got back from World War II, from his observations of prisoners when he was in war and around resiliency. And so out of that came what I think is the greatest personality assessment known, and here's why. Most personality assessments measure how we behave. It's our behaviors. It's how we're showing up in the world, at school, at work, with our families, and Berkman does that as well. Berkman also has embedded within the assessment an interest inventory, and that interest inventory is telling us on a scale of 1 to 99, I love that everything in the assessment is scaled, but on a scale of 1 to 99, what am I motivated and willing to do work-wise, and what de-energizes and demotivates me? So we've got an embedded interest assessment. We have what all personality assessments have, which is how do I show up in the world? What are my observable behaviors and strengths? But the secret sauce to me with Berkman is they actually measure our underlying expectations and needs that we have of other people and the world around us. So do I need a fast pace? Do I need things to be ambiguous or unambiguous? Which do I like better? Do I like taking a super measured approach and detailed approach to things, or am I super flexible? Am I more emotive or logical? So things like that. So these needs, I might behave in one way, and I think this is what we do as humans. We see somebody behave in one way, and we assume that that's how we should treat them. But not everybody's like that. So what Berkman shows us is I might behave this way. Like, for instance, I look like a raging extrovert, I know, but I am a hidden introvert. And so I show up well when I'm with people, but then I've only got so much energy to give to that, and I need to regroup my energy. So I'm not really a true extrovert. I just look like one. Playing the role of the extrovert today. So it tells us that person that maybe is the hidden extrovert or the hidden introvert. So it's those expectations. So ultimately what I'm doing personality-wise is I'm looking for jobs that students are going to be motivated to do. Their strength behaviors will be an asset in that job, and we're getting as many expectations of their coworkers and their work environment met as possible. No job's perfect.
On the extrovert introvert thing, have you read Quiet by Susan Cain?
I haven't.
It's a really good book about introverts and that whole idea of what it is. When I first kind of got the idea of I'm pretty outgoing, but I really do need that time to myself. Mm-hmm. And she talks about people like that a lot in the book. It's a really good book. Susan Cain, Quiet, is a book about that. What introverts look like or are actually probably like. Okay. The parent who's getting ready to look at, here's what this made me think about this, right? So if I'm talking to a student, Georgia Tech this year.
Yes.
Georgia Tech, 93% of the freshmen who got into, 93% of the class of 21 who were admitted to Georgia Tech took calculus in high school. Mm-hmm. So if you take calculus your senior year, that's pre-cal junior, algebra 2 sophomore, geometry freshman, and then algebra 1 eighth grade, unless they don't do the algebra sandwich, the geometry sandwich. So that means you are planning your math possibly as late as 7th grade, yep, but very likely in 6th grade, because a lot of school districts require a certain math track going into 7th grade. I know my local school district has a defined math track, yep, based on 7th grade math. And so they're having to make decisions in 7th grade, mm-hmm, in order to put them on a track to just be a competitive candidate for a highly selective school, or the 4 years of the same foreign language. Yes. That's not a stated requirement, but it's definitely
Right.
a differentiator.
Parents
in the
don't. That's a
process.
big one that parents don't usually know.
Oh, yeah. And so what advice would you give that parent of an 8th grader who, and when this comes out, this is going to come out mid-May, it may be the schedule for this year may be gone by, but there's adjustments you can make. What advice would you give to that parent who's trying to make that high school career pathway plan? I don't know if you have this in Ohio. We have this thing in Texas now that are all these career pathways that the school districts have created. They're relatively meaningless when it comes to the actual college admissions process, but they do give students exposure to careers in high school that may be of interest to them. What advice would you give to that parent who's looking down the road?
Yeah, so crystal balls would be great, wouldn't they?
Or that student. I guess that student, really, right? Because it's their journey.
Student. Right, absolutely. So I do find that we are so early on putting those kids in, their pathway, and then we get to this point of if I'm talking to a freshman or sophomore, we can still usually have some room for correction. And if they find themselves like, I want that highly selective school in a STEM area, and I probably need to be in Calc 1, AB or BC Calc in that senior year, there's still time for recovery there. So it might be through doubling up on geometry and algebra 2. It's tough. And we see actually for tutoring, we see a lot of the kids that do that end up needing tutoring to get through just because of the volume of math that they're consuming. It's not that they can't do it. It's just a lot to fit in academically and life. But that can be something that works. Summer school can be something that can also work. No kid wants to do summer school, but I often find if we're doing that career conversation and we're working towards career clarity in my utopian timeline, sophomore heading into junior year, if they fall in love with a career that they're exploring, then that sometimes can be a motivation. Or I'm sure you've seen this too. If they fall in love with a particular school and you're saying, you look more admissible, more attractive to that school if, I'm looking at the historical data of who got in, like you're pointing out with Georgia Tech. So therefore, this is what you might need to do. I've seen kids that actually, I have a student that I'm working with, one of my IEC clients, who she really wanted to be done with foreign language, but based on her list that her and her parents have of where she might want to go, I'm like, quitting now is going to, creak that door maybe a little bit more close. So there are ways to recover, but that's why you've got to be intentional and informed starting as early as possible. And even if your kid's not ready to have those conversations, I had a mom actually reach out to me on Facebook for our Flourish Coaching page on Facebook. She sent me a direct message and said, I have a 15-year-old. Well, a 15-year-old could be a freshman or a sophomore. And is it time yet? And I said, is that a freshman or a sophomore? She said, freshman. I said, it's not time yet. Again, knowing I was risking losing her. But I said, hey, would you like us to add you to our newsletter so that you're getting resourced and informed, even though I don't think it's yet the ideal time for your daughter to fully engage in the process yet? She said yes. So my advice to parents are get yourself educated, informed, reading, listening to podcasts like this, Shane, reading our newsletters that we put out, reading our blogs, so that you're making those good critical decisions, even if the student's not quite ready for those conversations.
So you mentioned your Facebook group. We have our Facebook group, Parent University. You've got a Facebook group too. So ours is really focused on the questions about college. Yours is about these career. What is that Facebook group called?
Yeah, it's Launch Career Clarity. Launch Career Clarity, all run together. So it's a fantastic community. We just started it in January 21, and it's a fantastic community of, I think 350 people at this point, who are parents of teens or young adults, or those that work with them. You're in there. And we continue the career clarity conversation every day. So we're having conversations, purposeful conversations around what can we all be talking about with our kids? What resources are out there to just move the needle every single day towards helping our kids know themselves, know careers, so they can know their path. And that's really what we're doing in there. It's been a lot of fun. It's actually one of my most fun places to show up every day.
Yeah. I'll put a link to both that and the Flourish website in the
Thank you.
program, the episode description. A couple of other questions for you on related topics then. Listening to one of our favorite podcasts, Tests and the Rest.
Yes.
About they had the person in there. I want to say I can't remember the name of the book now that they did. It's a real recent episode, and their guests talked about going to college. I love this because it made things real clear for me. People go to college generally for one of three purposes, and figuring out these three purposes is their clear thing. You remember what I'm talking about? So they either go for the education.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, have you listened to it?
I don't think I got this episode yet.
So he said it's like one or two back. He said you go for an education to learn stuff you didn't already know. That's one. Yep. You go for kinship to connect with people, classmates, professors, to build mentorship relationships, just collegial relationships along that way. Or you go for a credential. It's really kind of one of those three purposes. And one of the important things for the parent and the student to have a conversation about is, how do you rate those three things? Are they all three? They could all three be equally important. Mm-hmm. Is one more important than the other? For me personally, growing up, first generation college student, I needed a credential. I wanted to be a teacher. So credential was going to be the most important thing. I really wasn't focused on anything else. I hope for my kids, the education and the kinship can take a bigger priority based on what they want to do. What is your advice as far as those aspects go? Because you brought that up. A student focused on one school, they're prioritizing maybe kinship the most there.
Yeah, I would say so. When I enter into this conversation with parents, what I find is that answer can look really different depending on what your budget is for college, right?
Okay. That was my next question I was going to ask about.
Yeah. So from a career coaching standpoint, even if somebody says, even if a student or even a parent or whatever would say like kinship would be my number one, it's a pretty expensive investment to go to college just to meet people. And so we can't lose sight of the credential side of that, right? Mm-hmm. For me as a career coach, I think that it was such a common question back in the early 2000s that I was consistently getting, I was helping people with the test and the rest, all of the IEC stuff. And the constant question was, what are we going to study? And I'm like, I didn't have a great methodology for doing that. And so instead of doing the what's your favorite class at school, which oftentimes is driven by who the teacher is, quite frankly, not necessarily what they're studying in there. I'm like, we got to come up with a better way to do this. So to me as a career coach, I always say, I guess people probably don't know this figure. It's so secondary to me that I just know it and I forget to tell people. We're going to go to school. Our kids will go to school, kindergarten through 12th grade, 16,000 hours. You tell a kid that, you should see their face like, oh, yeah, I'm failing every one of those hours. It's a lot of times what their face says to me when I give them that figure. The average American in their working life works 90,000 hours. So the takeaway from that to me is you better do what you love, right? We better know ourselves well, get to know the careers well, again, because they only know what they're exposed to through their somewhat sheltered life as a 16-year-old and what their parents do. And so we've really got to take that credentialed part seriously, I believe. So I never want to lose sight of that.
I know, when I talk with clients, the clients that I'm going to work best with are the clients who when a client comes in and says, I really want them to have the college experience, I recognize that they're working on a level that's different because they're not concerned about the cost of college. And it's hard for me to separate that. That is definitely a huge factor for me. But there are families out there that it's not a factor for them. You can go to USC for an education major and be fine.
I have clients, I have a webinar that we do, one of our freebie webinars, and I actually have a money tree that is my image on the one slide. But I just say to people all the time, like, even if you have that money tree in your backyard, first of all, transplant some of it over to my yard, please. But even if you've got that money tree and you have an unlimited budget for college, like, this is about setting your child up for success in life. So yes, and I always say, I hope that you go to a college that you love. I hope that you go to the football games that you enjoy. I want all of it for you. But I also want you to leave not moving back into your parents' basement, because as you become empty nesters, there's some joy in that. And the kids think we want them in our house forever. We don't. And so kids, guess what? We don't. The empty nest years can be fun. So I want you out, thriving, not saddled with a ton of debt. And so the families with the money tree don't have to worry about the debt. But I want you credentialed and thrilled with the life that you're leading. That to me is what college has set us up for. So all of the three things that, you pointed out, like what's your primary driver on why college, I think they all need some attention. But at the end of the day, if that kid had an experience but is moving back into my basement and not out on their own, thriving as a young adult, then I think we've missed the mark.
Yeah. Okay. What is your attitude? This is not an area of my expertise. I am trying to educate myself on it about, students are going to get the direct loans. They're going to get about $37,000 worth of direct loans, pretty standard, $5,500, $6,500, $7,500 twice. They're going to have the opportunity then, and that's going to be an incredibly low interest rate. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of the attitude with that batch of money. Okay, it's manageable. Mm-hmm. The plus loans, because when you start looking about plus loans, they're pretty easy to qualify for, and the student easy, yeah. And the parent. So how do you approach? Did you deal with that very much in your
I don't deal
practice?
With that. I do work with a wide variety of families, as far as, actually I say I deal with the whole spectrum as far as academic ability. I deal with the whole spectrum from my pro bono clients to my wealthy clients on the financial side. So I do work with everybody across the board. I always say to kids, like, I don't mind that to load yourself up, like you said, with the federal student loan. If you get in and out of college in 4 years, that's my goal for students. Only 40% achieved nationally, we know, then you're going to have $27,000 worth of debt. That's the math on there. I think that's doable for almost any major, and that's not a red flag. I don't think parents should be taking out Parent Plus loans. It's not a favorable interest rate. If you're like me, you're thinking ahead to retirement. That's where, once I'm done paying for college, which I'm not yet, but when I am, diverting that income and that savings that I've had to help pay for college over into my own retirement, that is the goal there. And I don't think students should be saddled with much more than that federal student loan. So I think you need to make your college choice wisely with that number in mind.
Yeah. I think I said 37. 37 is the national average, isn't it? And it's 27.
27 is if you get in and out in 4 years. And the federal student loan is actually capped at $31,000. And a lot of families don't know that. Okay. So even if you go to college for that 5th year, I hope you don't, but if you do, and a lot of times that happens because they change their major so much they can't get in and out in 4 years. So if you have to go that 5th year, you can't, if you've already maximized your federal student loan the first 4 years, you don't have the full $7,500 left for your 5th year. You only have $4,000 left. And at this point, your merit scholarships went away because merit scholarships are for 4 years.
And if you didn't take that $5,500 as a freshman, you don't get to stack that on the $6,500 as a sophomore.
No.
So if you have to be strategic, and just like we're talking about planning for that math, your 12th grade math, that planning can start in 7th grade. That how you're going to finance college. If you have a 529, I do know this. If you have a 529, you can use $10,000 of that to pay back student debt at the end of graduation. So if you strategically think about that and take out some, I have some clients that have talked to me about that, and I've had to go research it.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. So it's thank you very. I mean, that's I always wonder how out there I am with some of my approaches, because I try to be very pragmatic about my approach to it, to the process. What's the ROI on the decisions you make? Because what I tell parents is, it's great that you want the college experience. Every college has an experience.
That's right.
So there's some fantastic things out there you can do.
There's so few kids that end up getting on a campus and really not finding their fit. I mean, truly. You know, your ROI point, I had a student that I was working with on career coaching. He really was interested in something in healthcare, and he was trying to figure out what. And we were going through the process, and there's always homework with the process. I don't do it for them. This is their journey. They get to go to college. This is what they get to be. And so as we were going through it, he said, oh, what about a chiropractor? Well, when we compared and I'm sorry, any chiropractors out there that are listening, but when we looked at like the average, the median salary for chiropractors, and we looked at the cost of the education, and then we compared it to some other more lucrative, better, frankly, ROIs for other careers in healthcare, he was like, oh my gosh. So like that's part of what we have to educate families on when we're looking at, is like job growth outlook, you know, when we're knowing careers, median income, what can I expect to make, and what's it going to take to get me there?
Yeah. How many years is it going to do?
Yeah.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Oh, thanks, Shane.
We could talk about careers all day long, but anyway, thank you so much for talking with us today. Shout out to Mike.
Absolutely.
And any last thoughts? We know flourishcoaching.com, launch Career Clarity for a Facebook group.
FlourishCoachingCo.com. Somebody
That's
grab
right.
that other one.
FlourishCoachingCo.com.
Launch Career Clarity on Facebook. Even if your kid is not yet in the sweet spot of ready for it, parents, get informed, join the Launch Career Clarity group. We're going to have a podcast coming out later this summer that will be a weekly podcast on careers and furthering career clarity. And sign up for the newsletter because it gives you tidbits. What I do in my newsletter is I'm curating resources. So we're here to just help families, and looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Shane.
Reach more people if you could rate and review the show wherever you listen, and share it on social media. If you have ideas for future episodes, please email me at shane@biblecollegeprep.com. Thanks for listening.